At its core, the EU operates as an economic union, fostering a common market where goods circulate freely across borders, devoid of any customs duties. This economic integration promotes trade and economic growth among member states, enhancing their collective prosperity. The EU embodies a unique political union characterized by a distinctive governance system. This system combines intergovernmental and supranational elements, often described as governance without government. Unlike traditional nation-states, where power is centralized in a single government, the EU's governance structure involves a network of institutions and decision-making processes that involve both national governments and EU institutions. Among these institutions, the European Parliament, headquartered in Strasbourg, plays a pivotal role as the EU's legislative body. Deputies are elected to represent the citizens of member states through universal suffrage, ensuring democratic representation and accountability within the EU's decision-making processes. The European Council serves as a forum for heads of states and governments to convene and discuss strategic priorities and policy coordination. Through regular meetings, leaders address key challenges facing the EU and seek consensus on various issues, ranging from economic policies to foreign affairs. Operating from Brussels, the Council of Ministers of the EU functions as the executive branch, where ministers from each member country come together to formulate and implement EU policies. Decisions within the Council are made through consensus, reflecting the collective interests and priorities of member states. The Court of Justice, located in Luxembourg, serves as the judicial arm of the EU, ensuring the uniform interpretation and application of EU law across member states. It adjudicates disputes and safeguards the rights of individuals in member states, contributing to the legal coherence and stability of the EU. European citizenship represents another cornerstone of the EU project, granting citizens certain rights and privileges. These include the right to vote and stand in municipal and European elections, as well as the freedom to move, reside, work, and study anywhere within the EU. This enhances mobility and fosters a sense of belonging among EU citizens. The EU's global presence is underscored by its participation in international forums, such as the G20, where it holds a seat. This allows the EU to contribute to discussions and decision-making processes concerning global economic and financial issues, reflecting its role as a significant actor on the world stage. The EU is often cited as the world's most advanced example of a supranational organization, one where member states have voluntarily ceded part of their sovereignty to common institutions. This level of integration contrasts with other regional bodies such as Mercosur, ASEAN, or the African Union, where decision-making remains more intergovernmental. A supranational organization is one in which decisions are made by institutions above the national level, and those decisions are binding for the member states. In the EU, this is evident in the roles of the European Commission, European Court of Justice, and European Parliament. In contrast, organizations like ASEAN operate by consensus and non-interference, prioritizing national sovereignty. The EU has built a common territory through the integration of European zones. The Schengen area, established in 1995, eliminates border controls among its 26 member countries, promoting seamless travel and connectivity within the region. Additionally, the Eurozone, with 19 member states sharing the euro since 2002, is managed by the European Central Bank in Frankfurt. Trans-European Corridors, TEN-T, Trans-European Transport Network, link vibrant economic zones or complementary regions. But European nations relinquish significant symbols of sovereignty, such as currency and borders. However, this unified currency and border-free space foster increased trade and mobility. The European megalopolis, stretching from London to Milan along the Rhine, serves as the core of the EU, concentrating activities, resources, and 40% of the European population. It hosts various functions, political and diplomatic institutions, in Brussels and Strasbourg, prosperous industrial areas like the Ruhr in Germany and northern Italy, financial institutions such as the European Central Bank, ECB, in Frankfurt, contributing to half of the European GDP, along with Paris, global influence with metropolises like Paris, which play significant roles within this dynamic region. Territories are interconnected with the world through major infrastructures. European institutions wield influence as a globalization node. Economically, the EU accounts for 15% of global exchanges, considering solely EU exchanges with the rest of the world. Politically, the EU holds a seat at the G20. The North European maritime facilities, known as the Northern Range, serving as a global interface, with Rotterdam ranking as the 9th largest global port. Airports, acting as global hubs, such as Paris-Charles de Gaulle, ranking 10th globally, facilitating access to destinations worldwide. Global influence with metropolises like Paris, which play significant roles within this dynamic region. Territorial inequalities persist within Europe. Regions farther from the megalopolis experience lesser integration. This includes Eastern European countries and overseas territories, characterized by their specific status as ultra-peripheral regions, UPRs. Southern peripheries face challenges due to migratory issues. The European Union comprises 9 outermost regions, OMRs. These are territories located far from the European continent, but are integral parts of EU member states. They fully belong to the EU and are subject to EU law, with certain adaptations, and facing specific challenges due to their specific geographical and socio-economic circumstances. Notes: outermost regions, OMRs, are fully part of the European Union. They benefit from EU structural funds and are subject to EU law, with adaptations. Saint Martin, the French part of the island, is an OMR. Its southern counterpart, Sint Maarten, is a non-EU overseas territory belonging to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The Netherlands has overseas territories, for example, Aruba, Curaçao, Sint Maarten, Bonaire, Saba, Sint Eustatius, which are overseas countries and territories, OCTs. These are not part of the EU but have a special association agreement, benefiting from limited access to EU programs and development aid. OCTs do not apply EU law, although they maintain special relationships with their EU member state. At both regional and local levels, there are also pockets of poverty. Member states must address these disparities by integrating rural peripheries, such as the south of Italy, urban peripheries, like the northern districts of Marseille. Germany, boasting the fourth largest global GDP as of 2018, stands as the leading economy within the EU, driven by several factors. Ranked third globally in terms of exports, Germany primarily exports manufactured goods, including automobiles, constituting 20% of exports, machinery and tools, 15%, and chemical products, 15%. These goods originate from industrial hubs like the Rhineland and the southern regions of the country. The nation benefits from major international trading hubs such as the Hamburg Container Port and prominent global city airports like Frankfurt and Munich. German products are renowned for their quality, high value added, and alignment with the demands of emerging markets. The Made in Germany label is extended through outsourcing to countries with lower labor costs, exemplified by the production of VW Touareg models in Slovakian factories. Integrated territories. These regions encompass ancient industrial zones, characterized by a significant pool of skilled labor and dense population concentrations. Situated within urban areas, they form pivotal components of the European megalopolis, constituting conurbations with millions of inhabitants, exemplified by cities like Essen, Düsseldorf, and Cologne. In the southern regions lie the states of Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, which historically benefited from economic development due to their strategic location at the intersection of the North Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. These areas host dynamic industries spanning automotive giants like BMW, renowned sportswear brands like Adidas, and thriving sectors in aeronautics and information technology, IT. Marginalized territories. Located from the eastern outskirts of Hamburg to the southern region of Leipzig, these areas are undergoing a process of reconversion. Despite significant EU assistance and large-scale infrastructure projects, they continue to grapple with economic and social challenges. Unemployment rates in former East Germany are roughly twice the national average, highlighting the persistent disparities in these regions despite ongoing efforts towards revitalization. The EU allocates one-third of its budget to cohesion policy, aiming to redistribute resources from more dynamic regions to the poorest areas through financial instruments like the EU structural funds. The European Regional Development Fund, ERDF, addresses imbalances between regions. Programs like Interreg facilitate transborder projects. The European Social Fund, ESF, supports social initiatives. The European Agricultural Fund for Rural Development, EAFRD, finances the Common Agricultural Policy, CAP. The Cohesion Fund and the European Investment Bank aim to enhance convergence, regional competitiveness, and territorial cooperation, particularly in sectors like transportation. These funds primarily support less developed regions such as Eastern Europe, as well as struggling regions in Western Europe like East Germany or Southern Italy. Additionally, ultra-peripheral regions, UPRs, receive specific assistance. Transborder regions, known as Euroregions, have emerged as a result of cohesion policy. These regions foster cooperation among multiple European states and serve as engines for integration. The aim is for cultural, social, and economic programs implemented in these regions to extend to the broader territory. For example, the Greater Region, established in 2010, encompasses France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Germany. The development and consolidation of regional or local nodes is a strategy aimed at enhancing the competitiveness of specific regions or localities within the context of global competition. This approach involves concentrating resources, investments, and economic activities in certain areas to stimulate growth, innovation, and job creation. In the European Union, EU, several policies and initiatives have been implemented to support the development of regional or local poles and address sustainable development challenges. One of the key policies of the EU in this regard is the cohesion policy, which aims to reduce economic and social disparities between regions by investing in infrastructure, innovation, education, and employment. Overall, the development and consolidation of regional or local poles play a crucial role in the EU's efforts to promote sustainable development and enhance competitiveness in a globalized economy. By investing in these areas and supporting initiatives that contribute to economic growth, innovation, and environmental sustainability, the EU aims to create inclusive and resilient communities that can thrive in the face of global challenges. Developing a European transport network entails transitioning from a patchwork of national-scale systems to a cohesive network on a global scale. The objectives include facilitating the exchange of goods and the free movement of people within the Schengen space, fostering common ideas within the EU, and promoting sustainable transportation practices. Metropolises like Paris, Frankfurt, and Milan are leading the way by prioritizing sustainable transport modes. Considering that 20% of greenhouse gas emissions in Europe originate from transportation, with 95% attributed to road transport. Additionally, the European Commission seeks to liberalize transport to enhance competitiveness across the region. The construction of trans-European routes involves several key projects aimed at improving connectivity and transportation efficiency across the continent. These include the high-speed railroad project connecting Paris, Strasbourg, Munich, Vienna, Bratislava, and Budapest, facilitating swift and efficient travel between major European cities. Existing railroad lines linking Paris, Brussels, London, and Frankfurt, serving as vital arteries for transportation and trade within the region. The Trans-European Road Network connecting Oslo, Hamburg, Luxembourg, Lyon, and Barcelona, facilitating road-based transportation and trade across multiple countries. Initiatives focused on promoting less polluting modes of transportation, particularly in maritime areas such as the Baltic Sea and the Mediterranean, aiming to reduce emissions and environmental impact while maintaining efficient transport routes. The construction of a European transport network remains incomplete, with significant territorial inequalities persisting across the continent. While the European megalopolis boasts a dense and modern transportation infrastructure, many states in Central and Eastern Europe still require significant modernization efforts. Certain infrastructure projects face opposition and challenges, such as the proposed Transalpine Railway line linking Lyon and Turin. This project, which involves the construction of a new tunnel through the Alps, has encountered delays due to widespread protests, particularly by the No-TAV movement. Concerns about the project's cost and ecological impact have fueled opposition. Additionally, the resurgence of border controls within the Schengen area, observed in countries like France, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Austria, raises questions about the future of free movement within the European Union. The European Regional Policy for 2021 to 2027 emphasizes 5 priority areas, which receive 30% of the budget allocation. These priorities include fostering innovation, facilitating the transition to renewable energy sources, improving transportation and communication networks, reducing social inequalities, and promoting democratization. At the forefront of this strategy is the European Green Deal, aimed at achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. By promoting ecological excellence and sustainable practices, the EU aims to enhance its global competitiveness while advancing environmental goals. Established in 1,962 inches Western Europe, the Common Agricultural Policy, CAP, now accounts for 30% of the European budget. Over the years, its objectives have evolved significantly. Initially, it aimed to ensure food security and increase productivity, leading to the development of intensive agriculture. However, by the 1980s, there was a shift towards addressing overproduction issues. In the 1990s and 2000s, the focus shifted towards rural development and promoting competitive agriculture in the face of globalization. In the 2010s, environmental concerns became more prominent, leading to the inclusion of economic, social, and environmental objectives in the CAP. These new objectives aim to increase competitiveness, rebalance power dynamics in the food supply chain, ensure fair incomes for agricultural workers, guarantee food quality and safety, and promote rural development while addressing environmental challenges such as climate change and biodiversity loss. However, implementing these objectives is challenging, especially considering the inherent tensions between competitiveness and environmental protection, as well as between competitiveness and income equity. Balancing these competing priorities remains a significant challenge for the CAP. The Common Agricultural Policy, CAP, operates through both direct and indirect aids aimed at ensuring a minimum price for producers. Since the 1960s, the CAP has been characterized by the establishment of a unified market, culminating in the formation of a customs union in 1968. It also introduced the principle of preferential treatment for products within the community and promoted financial solidarity among member states. In the 1980s, efforts were made to address overproduction within the European Economic Community, EEC. This included reducing indirect aids, implementing quotas, such as milk quotas introduced in 1984, and promoting fallowing or leaving land uncultivated to reduce excess production. These measures were aimed at stabilizing agricultural markets and managing surplus production. Tensions arose from competition among agricultural workers, both within Europe, intra-European competition with social dumping practices in certain member states, and between different agricultural models, such as organic versus conventional agriculture. Disputes between states and the EU over the use of substances like glyphosate further exacerbate these tensions. Another issue is the dependency of agricultural workers on EU subsidies, as well as their reliance on the chemical industry and fossil fuels, which has led to criticism of the intensive agricultural model. This dependency has also contributed to the decline in the number of farms and agricultural workers. Furthermore, there is a decrease in the CAP budget, exacerbated by the withdrawal of the United Kingdom from the EU, Brexit, along with international competition in agricultural markets. The crises of overproduction underscore both the success of the CAP in terms of agricultural productivity and the challenges in stabilizing markets effectively. The EU holds a central position in international trade, ranking as the world's top commercial power, surpassing both the US and China. This status is bolstered by robust intra-European trade and numerous free trade agreements such as CETA with Canada and JEFTA with Japan. However, European transnational corporations, TNCs, face challenges in global competitiveness, with only 12 among the world's top 100 TNCs, and notably absent are GAFAM companies. The EU's approach to fostering competitive TNCs has been hindered by concerns over hostile takeovers and unfair competition, as seen in the failed Siemens-Alstom merger due to monopoly fears. Moreover, industries like solar panels have been dominated by subsidized economies like China. In financial terms, the EU serves as a significant hub for both outgoing and incoming foreign direct investment, FDI. Its integration into the global financial landscape is evident, with stock markets in Frankfurt and Paris playing key roles. Additionally, the EU stands out as a major destination for migration and tourism. It ranks as the world's leading tourist hub, attracting a staggering 713 million visitors in 2018, representing nearly half of all global tourists. As a regional organization, it demonstrates a remarkable degree of integration, exemplified by its single market and currency. This integration allows the EU to advocate for liberalism and regulate trade effectively on the global stage, presenting a unified voice to protect its economic interests. With a vast internal market comprising 450 million people, the EU offers high living standards and substantial consumer purchasing power. This large market size contributes to the EU's economic clout and attractiveness to investors. Furthermore, the EU's productivity is noteworthy, accounting for nearly 20% of the global GDP, despite representing only 7% of the world's population. This productivity is fueled by a skilled workforce and top-quality productive infrastructures, enhancing the EU's competitiveness in the global economy. Such integration is rare globally. Most other regional organizations do not adopt shared currencies or legislation. The EU's supranational powers enhance its influence, but also cause tensions with member states seeking greater autonomy. The European Union serves as a potential model for the rest of the world in various aspects. Firstly, it upholds a moral system on the international stage, advocating for democracy and individual freedoms such as freedom of expression and movement. This commitment to democratic values was recognized when the EU was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2012. Additionally, the EU embodies a strong social model characterized by solidarity among its member states. As the largest provider of development aid globally, the EU allocates a significant portion of its gross national income to aid efforts, surpassing the contributions of other major economies like the US and Japan. The combined assistance from the EU and its member states constitutes a substantial portion of global development aid, highlighting the EU's commitment to addressing global challenges. Moreover, sustainability is a key component of the EU's diplomatic efforts, as evidenced by its support for international agreements such as the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement. The EU actively contributes to global efforts to combat climate change and promote environmental sustainability. Additionally, the growing representation of ecologist parties in the European Parliament reflects a commitment to advancing sustainable development goals within the EU's policymaking framework. Political challenges within the EU stem from its variable geometry approach, which allows for opting-out measures as seen in the Lisbon Treaty of 2007. This means that a state can choose whether or not to participate in certain common policies, while non-member states may also participate in some instances. For example, 19 states have adopted the euro currency. The process of enlargement further complicates matters, raising questions about how to reach agreements among 27 member states, particularly in sectors where unanimous voting is required. This risk of paralysis underscores the need to adapt institutions to accommodate enlargement, such as implementing qualified majority voting, requiring 55% of European states, or 15 out of 27, in certain areas, although this does not apply to all fields, such as foreign policy. The lack of a common foreign policy has been a notable challenge for the EU, highlighted by instances such as the war in Syria, where the EU struggled to present a unified position, leaving room for individual member states and outside actors like Putin to exert influence. The EU's power is dispersed across various roles, including the President of the Commission, President of the Council, President of the ECB, and High Representative for Diplomacy. This decentralized structure has led figures like American Henry Kissinger to famously quip, "Who do I call if I want to call Europe?" A common military policy has also been elusive for the EU. The European Defence Community, EDC, proposed in 1950 aimed to establish a unified army under European authority. However, the project faltered due to concerns such as the French Parliament's refusal to sign, fearing a resurgence of German militarism. Efforts like the Eurocorps, established since the Maastricht Treaty in 1992, have sought to address this gap by pooling military resources from member countries. Yet, these initiatives have faced considerable skepticism and reluctance from some member states. Euroscepticism, a term coined in the 1980s to denote a reevaluation of the EU's usefulness, has seen a rise in recent years, fueled by factors such as economic crises, migration challenges, and populist rhetoric that often scapegoats the EU for various issues. Extreme left factions often equate the EU with capitalism, liberalism, and corporate influence, criticizing it from an anti-capitalist standpoint. On the extreme right, Euroscepticism manifests as a rejection of European integration in favor of national sovereignty, economic protectionism, and anti-immigration policies. Figures like Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán have openly challenged EU policies, emphasizing national interests over European unity. Despite citizens becoming increasingly affected by European decisions, voter turnout in European elections remains low, with only 50% participation in 2019 compared to 62% in 1979. Additionally, discussions during these elections tend to revolve around national issues rather than European ones. Eurosceptic and illiberal parties have made significant gains, with the extreme right securing 73 seats and Eurosceptic right-wing parties claiming 62 seats in the 2019 elections, collectively representing about 18% or one-fifth of the European Parliament. This lack of a sense of European belonging is exacerbated by what critics perceive as a democratic deficit within the EU. Decisions regarding issues like enlargement often lack direct consultation with the people, while the European Commission, responsible for drafting legislation, consists of appointed officials rather than elected representatives, leading to accusations of technocracy and a disconnect from democratic principles. Since 2010, Europe has experienced a significant influx of migrants and refugees, peaking in 2015 with over 1 million arrivals, followed by a decrease to 122,000 in 2018. The three main maritime routes in the Mediterranean have become increasingly congested, leading migrants to seek entry into the Schengen area for its free movement. The western route to Spain, the central route to Lampedusa in Italy, and the eastern route to Greece. The root causes of this migration include conflicts in Syria and Iraq, as well as growing political, economic, and environmental instability in countries like Sudan, Libya, Nigeria, and Bangladesh. However, the majority of refugees remain in neighboring countries, with Turkey hosting 3.4 million Syrians and Libya accommodating 1.5 million Syrian refugees and 500,000 Palestinians, constituting one-third of its population. Since 2010, Europe has experienced a significant influx of migrants and refugees, peaking in 2015 with over 1 million arrivals, followed by a decrease to 122,000 in 2018. The three main maritime routes in the Mediterranean have become increasingly congested, leading migrants to seek entry into the Schengen area for its free movement. The western route to Spain, the central route to Lampedusa in Italy, and the eastern route to Greece. The root causes of this migration include conflicts in Syria and Iraq, as well as growing political, economic, and environmental instability in countries like Sudan, Libya, Nigeria, and Bangladesh. However, the majority of refugees remain in neighboring countries, with Turkey hosting 3.4 million Syrians and Libya accommodating 1.5 million Syrian refugees and 500,000 Palestinians, constituting one-third of its population. The journey across the Mediterranean Sea is perilous, resulting in a significant number of deaths, including 20,000 in the Mediterranean between 2014 and 2019, and an additional 6,000 on routes through Africa. Many of these migrants rely on illegal passage through transit countries such as Turkey and Libya. Europe is divided on how to address this migration crisis, with debates over containment versus welcoming policies. The European Commission advocates for quotas and solidarity among member states, but some countries, like Hungary, resist such measures. The Frontex agency monitors borders outside the Schengen area, and hotspots were established in arrival zones such as Lampedusa, Sicily, Lesbos, and Niger for migrant processing. Additionally, agreements with transit countries have been pursued to stem the influx of migrants, as seen in the 2016 deal with Turkey. However, these policies face criticism from humanitarian organizations, particularly those operating in the Mediterranean to rescue migrant boats, such as SOS Méditerranée and Open Arms. The European Union faces significant challenges in harmonizing fiscal policies due to the diverse fiscal systems of its member states, which vary widely in terms of social contributions, VAT rates, TVA rates, and income taxes. Fiscal revenue constitutes over 40% of GDP in 7 states, including France, Italy, Austria, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Belgium, while it remains below 30% of GDP in countries like Ireland, Lithuania, Romania, and Bulgaria. Each country uses its fiscal policies as a tool to attract investment, leading to competition and fiscal dumping among member states. Taxation of multinational companies poses particular difficulties, with the EU struggling to implement a common tax on digital giants. France has attempted to address this issue by proposing its own GAFAM tax to temporarily tax income from certain digital activities of companies like Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft at 3%. However, progress on this initiative has been slow. Fiscal policies also contribute to efforts to evade taxes. with individuals and companies seeking refuge in countries like Switzerland, Singapore, Bahrain, Panama, and the Bahamas. This tax evasion is estimated to result in a loss of approximately €120 billion for the EU. Following the LuxLeaks scandal in 2014, the European Commission established a list of tax havens and countries under scrutiny, yet none of the EU member states are included. However, NGOs like Oxfam argue that 4 EU states, Luxembourg, Ireland, Malta, and the Netherlands, should be on the list due to their tax policies. Once seen as barriers, borders within the EU, particularly those involving France, have become active zones of mobility and exchange. Since 1990, the number of French cross-border workers has nearly doubled, making France the leading EU country in this type of labor mobility. Beyond employment, cross-border flows include residential migration, education, healthcare, shopping, and leisure. In regions such as the Grand Est, daily border crossings are part of normal life, fostering the emergence of cross-border living areas where people live and work on opposite sides of national boundaries. These flows also involve significant goods exchanges. Germany and Belgium, France's key trade partners, account for large volumes of imports and exports, often originating from both nearby and more distant EU regions. European integration has been central to this process. The Euro, Schengen area, liberalized trade, and EU cohesion policies have removed traditional barriers and enabled closer economic and social ties. Mobility is also driven by regional disparities. Wage gaps, lower housing costs, and better services across the border attract workers and families. For instance, unemployment in Lorraine and Hauts-de-France pushes workers toward job-rich areas like Luxembourg or Geneva. These dynamics bring both benefits and challenges. While local economies gain from increased spending and logistical development, higher demand can inflate housing prices and strain services in border communities, sparking local tensions. The EU promotes cross-border cooperation as a key tool of territorial cohesion. These areas, often seen as testing grounds for integration, aim to reduce the border effect and foster joint development. Projects emerge from partnerships between local authorities, regional actors, and EU institutions, addressing everyday needs: transport, environment, economy, healthcare. For example, the Cerdaña Hospital on the Franco-Spanish border offers shared health services to both populations. Financial support comes mainly from the European Regional Development Fund, ERDF, through the Interreg program. Since 2006, EGTCs, European Groupings of Territorial Cooperation, provide a legal structure for managing joint projects. A successful model is the Lille-Kortrijk-Tournai Eurometropolis, connecting France and Belgium. The proposed European Cross-Border Convention, ECBC, seeks to remove legal barriers that still limit cooperation. France, as a centralized state, was initially less equipped than federal countries like Germany to support local cross-border initiatives. Local authorities lacked the autonomy to act independently. This has shifted with recent decentralization reforms. The MAPTAM and NOTRI laws have strengthened the role of regions and metropolitan areas in managing territorial development, including cross-border partnerships. France has also led some key initiatives. The Strasbourg-Ortenau Eurodistrict, 2005, with Germany pioneered a new model of shared governance. The Aachen Treaty, 2019, reinforced this cooperation, removing administrative hurdles at the Franco-German border and supporting joint infrastructure and planning. France's cross-border territories vary significantly in terms of intensity, purpose, and institutional development. These differences are shaped by geographic context, socio-economic contrasts, infrastructure, and the degree of political integration. Northern and eastern borders, with Belgium, Germany, Luxembourg, and Switzerland, are the most active. These regions benefit from strong economic disparities, linguistic proximity, and efficient transport networks. Daily commuting is widespread, and metropolitan hubs like Strasbourg and Lille are at the forefront of integration, leading pioneering initiatives such as Eurodistricts and EGTCs. Southern borders with Spain and Italy display more limited and localized forms of cooperation. When linguistic barriers such as the Pyrenees and Alps constrain daily flows. Yet, projects like the Basque Eurocity and the Cerdagne Cross-Border Hospital show that targeted cooperation can still thrive. Along the Italian border, most initiatives focus on environmental protection, notably in areas like Mont Blanc and the Mediterranean coast near Nice. Overseas and outermost regions, particularly French Guiana, Guadeloupe, and Mayotte, present unique challenges. These territories border non-EU countries, for example, Brazil, Suriname, and Comoros, and are part of the EU's outermost regions, OMRs. Unlike European borders, these areas face stark development gaps, weaker transport and administrative links, and heightened migration pressures. In French Guiana, for instance, the bridge linking Saint-Georges de l'Oyapock, France, and Oiapoque, Brazil, symbolizes a fragile yet strategic cross-border connection. EU cohesion funds and specific legal frameworks target these regions, but their integration remains uneven and limited. This typology highlights the asymmetry of France's border regions, from high-functioning integration zones in Europe to more marginalized and development-focused borders overseas, each demanding tailored policy responses and governance models. A historically connected and densely populated region, the France-Belgium border, extending over 620 kilometers, lies within one of the most densely populated and economically vibrant areas in Western Europe. The region connects major urban centers such as Lille, Brussels, Kortrijk, Courtrai, and Tournai, where cultural, linguistic, and economic ties are deeply rooted. The area's integration is significantly enhanced by high-speed rail links, including Thalys, Eurostar, and ICE services, which ensure fast and regular connections between Paris, Lille, Brussels, Cologne, Amsterdam, and London. This facilitates cross-border commuting, business travel, and international exchanges. The Euro metropolis Lille-Kortrijk-Tournai, created in 2008 as the EU's first European Grouping of Territorial Cooperation, EGTC, exemplifies institutional innovation in cross-border governance. It integrates 14 French and 19 Belgian municipalities, representing over 2 million residents in a single cross-border urban region. EU policy as a lever for cohesion and joint governance. This region has benefited extensively from EU cohesion policy, particularly through Interreg, funding for cross-border projects in transport, environmental management, healthcare, and economic development. The EGTC provides a flexible and legally recognized governance structure for coordinating policies and initiatives across national borders. The presence of federal structures in Belgium and increasing decentralization in France has empowered local and regional authorities to engage directly in cross-border cooperation without excessive dependence on central governments. This bottom-up integration model aligns closely with the EU's principle of subsidiarity. A successful example of territorial integration. The France-Belgium cross-border zone is one of the EU's most successful in terms of functional integration. Labor mobility is high, supported by wage alignment, mutual recognition of qualifications, and strong transport infrastructure. Shared public services, such as hospitals, cultural centers, and educational programs, are routinely accessed across the border. Business parks and innovation hubs have also emerged, benefiting from joint economic development strategies. In contrast to EU outermost borders, this case illustrates how integration thrives in contexts of economic parity, political alignment, and institutional maturity. It serves as a reference point for what EU integration can achieve under favorable conditions. A remote border shaped by history and marginality. The border between French Guiana and Brazil, stretching over 730 kilometers through the Amazon rainforest, is France's longest land border and forms part of the European Union's external frontier. Though this border was only officially settled in 1900 after centuries of colonial contestation, it continues to reflect the enduring legacy of geopolitical uncertainty and environmental constraints. French Guiana, as an outermost region of the EU, is subject to EU law and benefits from cohesion funds, yet remains geographically and functionally peripheral to both France and the continent. The region is sparsely populated and infrastructurally underdeveloped. The French town of Saint-Georges de l'Oyapock and the Brazilian city of Oiapoque are small and historically isolated. Although Saint-Georges is connected to Cayenne by the RN2 road, Oiapoque remains linked to Macapá via a long, partially unpaved route. The harsh equatorial climate, low population density, and complex hydrological and forested terrain all challenge territorial development and integration efforts. EU instruments for territorial cohesion have limited reach in such contexts, where the obstacles are infrastructural, ecological, and international in nature. Infrastructure without functional integration. The construction of the Oyapock Bridge, completed in 2011 and opened only in 2017, symbolized France's ambition to integrate French Guiana more closely with its South American environment. It was also intended to strengthen bilateral ties with Brazil. However, the bridge quickly revealed the limits of infrastructure-driven integration in the absence of political, administrative, and regulatory alignment. Disagreements over visas, vehicle insurance standards, and border control procedures delayed the bridge's opening by several years. Even today, goods and passenger flows remain minimal, and the bridge is largely symbolic. Rather than facilitating mobility, the bridge introduced new forms of control. Long-standing informal movement, particularly by river pirogue, continues, while new regulations disrupted traditional practices. Brazilian residents face restricted access to French territory, whereas French nationals enjoy visa-free entry. In practice, the infrastructure serves more as a border checkpoint than as a platform for integration. The contrast with the EU's internal borders, where regulatory harmonization facilitates mobility, is stark. Unequal development and fragile cooperation. The border is marked by strong socio-economic asymmetries. French Guiana benefits from EU funding, public services, and higher incomes, while Oiapoque faces limited infrastructure, informal housing, and economic fragility. These disparities have created resentment and encouraged unregulated settlements, such as Vila Vitória, populated by displaced or economically vulnerable people. Although cross-border cultural and familial ties exist, mistrust and asymmetry shape the relationship. Cooperation is often constrained by security and health concerns. Illegal gold mining, or pillage clandestine, has led to French military patrols along the Oiapoque, while the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the fragile nature of local trust and coordination. The border was closed, the bridge shuttered, and military and police presence intensified to prevent viral transmission, particularly from Brazil, where public health measures were less stringent. This further exposed the limits of cross-border partnership when state priorities diverge. This case shows that EU cohesion policy, while powerful within the Schengen area, struggles to extend meaningfully to outermost regions situated along international boundaries. Integration here is less about common institutions and more about bilateral negotiation, infrastructure maintenance, and local community ties. Unlike borders within continental Europe, the French Guiana-Brazil frontier reflects how geography, post-colonial legacies, and asymmetrical development can limit the EU's integrative reach despite formal membership. Integration here is not driven by common EU policies alone, but requires bilateral engagement, legal harmonization, and investment in trust across historical and developmental divides.